Hello and welcome everyone. It is 11:30 Central, so we will get started. Thank you for tuning in to today's webinar, Resources and Activities for Education and Training Career Cluster. My name is Emily and I will be your moderator for today's presentation. Presenting today, we have Denise DuBois, one of our product managers here at Realityworks. Denise has been with us for a little over 10 years and is a frequent presenter, trainer, and blogger for all things related to Real Career Baby, family consumer sciences, culinary, and other related topics. She has over 20 years of education, marketing, product design, and curriculum writing experience and is a fantastic resource for today's webinar. Before we get started, I do want to cover a couple things. First, today's presentation is being recorded and everybody will receive a link to that recording. Everybody that is attending today also will receive a certificate of completion, as well as the handouts and PowerPoint slides that Denise will be going over. You should see that in your inbox within 24 hours after the presentation today. We will have time at the end for a Q&A session, so if any questions come up, please feel free to type those in the chat or the Q&A section located at the bottom, and we will answer those at the end. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and pass things over to Denise to get us going.
Thanks, Emily, and welcome everyone to our session today on the Education and Training Career Cluster. We're going to start the session off by sharing some ideas and resources for teaching soft skills needed for education and training careers. Then we're going to go into some resources and activities for teaching some related technical skills. And then at the end, we're also going to touch on some career exploration resources. So let's kick it off with a discussion of some soft skills needed by education professionals or professionals working in education and training. And we're going to be sharing many scenarios with you that you could use and try with students in your program. So first of all, let's take a look. Here's a list of 40 essential soft skills that every educator should possess, or this is someone's version of a list. There are many lists out there, but you can see skills like teamwork, empathy, patience, critical thinking, and related things are used every single day on the job. And as an educator, I'm sure I don't need to tell you that. What about administrators? Do administrators need the same soft skills as teachers? Or are there different ones that are important? And that could be a very interesting discussion point with your students. What do they think? Well, we know that soft skills matter, no matter if you're an educator or administrator. And we dug into some of the research, and there are many, many studies that can attest to the importance of soft skills. But here are just a few that we found that we wanted to highlight today. We found a 2020 study by the SHRM Talent Conference, and one of the statistics that stood out was the fact that 97% of employers believe that soft skills are the most important, and that's almost 100%. So many believe you can teach those technical skills, but boy, soft skills are a lot harder. There's another research study that came out by Harvard University, and they said that 85% of job success comes from having well-developed soft and people skills, and only about 15% of job success comes from having those technical skills. And then a third study by Microsoft found that 30 to 40% of future jobs will depend on social emotional skills, or those important employability skills. So we know it's very, very important to weave some soft skill instruction into our courses. Scenario-based learning really lends itself very well to integrating soft skills instruction. And here are just a few things to consider as far as benefits of scenario-based learning. First of all, when you use it, it creates sticky learning experiences, meaning your students are going to remember what they learned. It also facilitates problem solving in your learners. So it's going to put your students in new and different situations. Let's say you use some scenarios, and we will be sharing a few here that could take place on the job in education and training. It may be a scenario that they've never themselves been in before, but once they have to role play and think about that and problem solve, it makes them think about things in a whole new light. We also know that scenario-based learning can provide guided exploration to learners. It will give your students explicit, thoughtful, critical thinking opportunities. It also provides that safe practice zone to gain proficiency and mastery. So your students don't need to fear risk of consequences. Now's their chance to practice and learn. It also allows your students to make mistakes and through feedback, reinforce that right approach. So now again is the time for your students to practice so they'll know what to do when they come across situations like this in real life. We want to help build our students' toolkit of responses and approaches. So we know that career and technical education programs have used the power of scenarios for years to help teach both key soft skills and technical skills. Now, sometimes your scenario may even include the use of a simulator or some sort of hands-on resource. So here in the picture, you can see an example of a simulator. It's our Real Care Baby simulator that can be used a few different ways to learn not only technical skills in infant care, but you can use it as a soft skill instructional tool as well. For instance, you could use a Real Care Baby simulator to practice soft skills such as problem solving or patience in scenarios, or you could really create any scenario you wanted. You could have one student be the childcare worker, actually learning, how to take care of an infant, and the other could be a parent or even a childcare director, and then you could switch roles. So there's a lot of different ways that you could integrate soft skill use through scenarios. Now, one very simple yet effective way to help your students learn a variety of soft skills is through our pathway-specific scenario cards. And we have these written by subject matter experts. And we have one deck that's all about childcare career scenarios. And all of them involve 19 different separate soft skills. Each of the scenarios includes a point of view to consider, as well as key discussion questions. So we're going to share several of the scenarios from our childcare career scenario card deck that you could use and try with your students in your classroom. So, we know that scenarios are a great way to get your students to interact with each other and with the content. So here's an example of a childcare scenario relating to the soft skill of responsibility. Now, this could be a perfect to use in a facts related or even a teaching career exploration lesson. Now, sometimes we know it's fun to have our students try their acting skills. So I'm going to read the scenario, and then we're going to talk about what we could do with that. So here's one on responsibility. One day, a child in your care breaks his arm. This was traumatic for all involved, but you made it through and the child is doing okay. The center director needs a detailed report on the accident, and she asks you to take the last 20 minutes of your shift to complete the forms for the insurance company and the state licensing department. She'll be asking your co-teacher, Gretchen, to fill them out also. Now, it's been a tiring day, and you want to leave early. Gretchen is also filling out the forms, and she's a better writer. So you scribble down a few general notes of information and put it in the center director's box. You get to leave 15 minutes early. But later that night, you receive a text from the center director asking for specific details of the accident. She needs more information because your forms weren't thorough. You text Gretchen and ask her about the report. She tells you that the center director asked her to fill out the actual report documents. She is working on them right now, and they are due first thing in the morning. You feel badly because you didn't complete your responsibility, and others are needing to pick up your slack. So you can see how you could take a situation or a scenario like that, and you could even assign students to do different roles of the people in the scenario and have them role play, act it out in front of the class. And then after it's done, then you could ask those key questions that are on the back, and that could generate a class-wide discussion. So they're very, very flexible, but it's something very easy to integrate in your course. Now, here's another childcare scenario focused on the soft skill or employability skill of self-confidence. So if you're teaching in a remote environment, you could even read this, you could scan this, or you could share it in an LMS system with your students. You could create a brief recording where you're reading the scenario, and then you could put those key questions out in a discussion forum for students to weigh in on. Again, things like this are very, very flexible, but and can easily be used to integrate some soft skill instruction into your education and training career cluster content. Now, here's an elementary education scenario from one of our career exploration pathway decks. We also have a very complete elementary education scenario kit that takes a much deeper dive into the day-to-day decision-making that you would encounter as an elementary education teacher. You could use this scenario to focus on the soft skill of problem solving in this kind of a case. So let's share. One of your students becomes irate every time you ask them to draw for an assignment. Last week, the student broke down in tears when asked to complete an illustration relating to a novel they read and loved. Earlier this week, the student cried again and said he would take a 0 before completing a required comic strip. After having the student in class for 3 months and talking to his previous teachers, you know that his goal is to have top scores in all of his classes. The 3rd grade student refuses to speak to the school counselor about the situation. So you can see how the key questions and the points of view to consider from the teacher to the student to the parents could really lead to some rich discussion. Now, teachers at every level have many responsibilities, and this is a great little scenario to discuss something like time management and all the responsibilities and competing priorities that teachers have every single day. So the scenario, there are 4 9th grade math teachers at a very large high school where you work. Each teacher is responsible for their lesson plans, curriculum maps, and accompanying materials. Every Friday, you stay to prep all lessons, assessments, and other materials for the following week. One teacher frequently texts you over the weekend, claiming they have not had time to put together materials for the coming week. They ask you to share your materials so they are prepared for class each Monday morning. Boy, that could really generate some discussion, I'm sure. You can see built into some of those key questions, discuss time management. Is it your place to critique if your colleague does not have enough time to prepare the materials, and so forth. So again, great discussion generating activity. Now, administration also includes more staff than just the school principal. So you could give your students a window into the soft skills needed for an administrative services career as well for a scenario like this. So as a member of your administrative team, you've been asked to improve the positive news about the school district. To do this, you will work with the public relations team to report school and community events via various media sources. In the past, it was mentioned that too many news stories focused on select students and staff members. So looking through your points of view and your key questions, you can see how you could weave this into soft skills needed for support staff or administrative services. In addition, so it gets students thinking about those types of occupations within the education and career cluster. Now, we know it takes many different types of staff members to meet the needs of children. So you could try this soft skills scenario, which illustrates the importance of teamwork. Here's our scenario. Several professional services are offered to students on Fridays. Recently, some teachers complained that having students pulled out of class to receive occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy, and other services on Fridays interferes with weekly assessments. Today, when calling for a student to attend their weekly OT session, the teacher refused to send the student, commenting that they had a test to take. Now, knowing that the student needed to attend OT at that time to not mess up the therapist's schedule, you try to get the teacher to reconsider. So again, you could talk all about how good teamwork skills wouldn't be needed in a situation like this. So those are just a free of the scenarios that we wanted to share today that you could plug into your courses and try some soft skill integration. Now, as far as sources for scenarios, there are many, many ways to create short scenarios like the 4 or 5 that I just shared, but you don't have to do it all yourself. You could get industry involved. You could get some people in your local community. Many of you may even have advisory boards that you tap into for various CTE programs. And because you're all educators and part of the education and training career cluster by the very nature of your own job, you can probably have a lot of different colleagues that could also help you be sources for scenario. You could get your students involved. Students love to be creative. Invite them to also each come up with a scenario that you could share and problem solve. And you could get many, many that way. Talk to family members who also might be in education and training. You might have friends, family, coworkers. There's a whole lot of resources you can tap into that immediately right around you. And then, of course, if all else fails, you can Google it. There are a lot of scenarios online that are ready to go that you could also share. Now, videos are really a good way to get your students actively engaged in problem solving and critical thinking. All it takes is a few keyword searches on something like YouTube, and you come up with dozens of videos on a variety of different soft skills in the workplace. Now, some of these might be general soft skills, not specific to education and training, but you would be surprised at how nicely they can fit into just wanting to do soft skills integration into an education and training course. Many of them that you find on YouTube are short, and some are quite engaging. You could show a scenario, you could stop and discuss as a class, you could even turn it into a writing exercise. For example, how would you handle this if, or what would you do differently? If you find yourself even working in a hybrid or remote environment, you could embed or share some of these video links with your students, and it makes it a very easy way to also integrate some soft skill instruction into your programs. So you've just seen how scenarios can be used to teach soft skills in education and training, but they can also be equally effective for teaching technical or hard skills, those really important transferable career skills. So now we're going to share some different scenarios you could use in your program to teach technical skills for education and training. Now, this is an infant scenario from our CDA Scenario Kit, and it focuses on advancing physical and intellectual competence. Now, this is one you could use in your own program for remote learning. You could even scan the card. You could post the scenario on an LMS system. You could create a short video recording yourself reading it and post the key questions. So again, they're very flexible in the teaching environments. And then after written assignments are turned in, you could even do a debrief by providing some of the possible solutions that are on the card. And some of these are very short, but they're decision-making skills that people in occupations that are in education and training would encounter. For example, in this one, it's you work with an infant class and you have a 4-month-old that cries every time you lay him on his stomach for tummy time. But you know tummy time is important, but you just like seeing him cry. It's a short scenario, but again, very good at making students do some critical thinking and some problem solving there. Now, this is a toddler scenario that's also from our CDA Scenario Kit. And this scenario focuses on establishing and maintaining a safe, healthy learning environment. And this is one that you could use and try. It's a scenario-based problem-solving exercise. For in-class learning, you could even break students into small groups. They could discuss the scenario, answer those key questions, and then you could have each small group come up with one possible solution before sharing the ones that you see on the card here. Again, very, very flexible and an easy way to do that. This is a preschool scenario that is also from our CDA Scenario Kit, and this scenario focuses on supporting social and emotional development and providing positive guidance. You have a new girl who started in your class and she's not playing with the other children. She's often by herself coloring or in the cozy corner. So you can use a scenario like this in, again, many different learning environments. You could use your in-person time to introduce a scenario, give them the key questions and the task with coming up with possible solutions to the students. They could do that in class, or if they have some remote time, they could do that on their own. And then when you get back together for your next in-class, in-person class, solutions could then be shared and answers to those key questions could be discussed at that point. Now, we've referenced our CDA Scenario Kit, and just to give you a little more information about it, the 3 scenarios we just shared came from that. And that kit includes scenarios for the 13 standards areas students need to master as part of the CDA certification. And you can see how scenario-based learning could be useful in any learning environment. A kit like this can save you time, but you can certainly come up with your own scenarios if you didn't have something like this. But this kit comes also with scenario cards and workbooks to extend the learning experience. So you could use those scenario cards as short icebreaker activities. You could use the workbooks to teach some of the content. And then you could use scenario cards also as an assessment tool. And for each of those 13 areas, there are 6 scenarios. And you've got scenarios that speak to infant toddler and then also to the preschool level. So there's a lot of good content and meat in that kit. We also have an elementary education scenario kit that provides that deeper dive into the decisions and knowledge needed by elementary education teachers. And I've shared a couple of scenarios from this kit already. But here is the lessons and the content that the curricula covers. And it's all things that you as an instructor would be very familiar with, from curriculum to assessment, positive classroom environment, activities and transitions, and how to meet the needs of all of your learners and things like that. And there are activities built into all 6 lessons to put students into the role of an elementary educator, and they'd have to deal with all of these different types of topics. So it really gives them a good idea of what they could expect to do day to day as an elementary educator. Here's a scenario from that kit, and this scenario just happens to fall within the positive classroom environment lesson. Now there are multiple scenarios for each of those lesson topics, but here's just one that's all about positive classroom environments. Mrs. Jones is a veteran 5th grade teacher. However, over the past few years, she has noticed that her students need space for reflection and quiet. While she has a classroom library that she thinks will fit this purpose, she wants to make sure her classroom spaces are intentional. How could she reorganize her classroom library or other spaces in her classroom to give students what they need? So your students can think about it, they can answer those key questions, and then you could call them back together and share those possible solutions. So now let's look at some other free resources for teaching transferable career skills in this area. But before we go on to the next section, this is an access link I always like to share. We have many of our facts related lesson plans all available for free at this link here. And when it will take you out to a website, you see kind of a screenshot there. And if you click on family and consumer science, it lists many different areas, and depending on what you're looking for, when you click on, let's say, childcare education on the plus sign, it will show you access to many of our related childcare education curricula, and you can go into there and use the lesson plans for free. There's a wealth of resources at this link, and we want to make sure that you have a knowledge of that so that you're not reinventing the wheel. Hundreds of pages of curricula, lesson plans, slide presentations, assessment activities. So a great place to go for a lot of different education and training lessons that could be adapted. Now, the Child Care Center Design Kit is a hands-on design experience for students tasked with designing 3 different rooms in a child care center. Infant, toddler, and preschool. And students will learn best practices, first of all, for laying out the space in an infant room, toddler room, or preschool room for optimal learning and student interaction. The kit includes curriculum written by an experienced BACS instructor with strong child care program background. So the kit includes scale tiles that represent furniture found in child care centers. And students design their space on a dry erase board, designing the layout of that ideal space for each of those different age groups. And we've included enough material so that 5 small groups or 5 individuals can be working on this activity simultaneously. You've got dry erase markers and microfiber cloth, so you can draw in additional room details like learning centers and so forth. And here's an activity that comes from the curricula with that kit that you have access to for free. And this is an activity where your students gather all the information they're going to need to plan out that ideal space. And you can access it from the free curriculum link. And when you click on the Child Care Center Design Kit, it will take you to this. And this is something you could easily use in a remote environment. You could give students some information on that optimal room design through videos or from some of the lecture notes that are in the lesson. The planning form could be completed at home or in class if you're in person. I could also share any of these forms on an LMS system, but once your students complete that, then they're ready to draw their plan. And if you don't have the Child Care Center Design Kit, you could use graph paper, and I've included a link on the slide here. There's many free graph paper printable websites out there if you look for them, but here's just one. So they could print out that free graph paper and they can lay out the design from their planning form that they've completed. So that's always a really fun hands-on activity for students to be thinking about the educational environment that they're teaching in. Now, here's some things you can think about for Real Care Baby. It's our advanced infant simulator, and we've got educators around the world using this to teach infant care skills. And many of you are probably familiar with it. Baby will track all of the care events, any mishandle events. And there are 4 sets of curricula that go with Baby. And they are also available at the link that I shared earlier. And many of these are very relevant to the education and training career cluster. So we wanted to make sure that you knew about the 4. The one that most closely aligns to careers in infant care would be our basic infant care curricula that you can find at that link. And we highlight that because it's all about teaching basic infant caregiving skills, working with infants on the job. And that curriculum is especially beneficial to CT programs that may have a certification in early childhood or the CDA. Whether or not your program leads to a credential or certification, Basic Infant Care uses Real Care Baby in the lessons to provide hands-on practice, learning infant caregiving skills such as soothing a crying baby, holding, feeding, diapering, and so forth. So here's an example of one way you could use the lesson content from the Basic Infant Care curricula to teach technical skill, infant care skill on holding and feeding. You access that lesson, and it begins with an introductory discussion called the Hold Me introductory discussion. And you could use Real Care Baby to do an in-person demonstration of the proper way to hold and handle an infant. And then you could pass around, give your students that hands-on practice for holding and handling an infant. There is a ready-to-use slide presentation that's also available to you in that lesson. And then we would also suggest that you use video clips from our Real Care Baby app, which is a free app for Android and iPhones that has video clips of students doing care events with Real Care Baby. And one of them is how to hold and handle a baby. You could also use the free participant care video that you have access to that shows students holding Real Care Baby. Or there are even holding and feeding a newborn videos that exist on YouTube. There are many of them. Here's just one link that I found that you could also show students how to properly hold and handle an infant. There is also an activity that's all about bottle feeding and breastfeeding. There's written information in the lesson, and students have to complete an activity. There's a worksheet that goes along with it, but you can see how this type of lesson could easily take up an hour of teaching time. Now, we also have, we know that two very important skills for childcare workers are infant CPR and how to dislodge a choking object from an infant. And we have a couple of different simulators that, of course, provide those hands-on practice in safe, risk-free environments. But we know that these skills are skills that need to be learned through hands-on practice. And there are still some things that you could do if you don't have these two babies or you're working in a remote environment to help your students learn some of these skills. So you could use the time, if you've got students that are remote, you could share important procedural information on infant choking and CPR. And we have two different curricula that you have access to at the link that I shared. And in each of those lessons, it gives the proper list of steps to be followed in the procedure for both infant CPR and in a choking infant. And you can also find a link to videos. I've included one above here on infant CPR. There's some on choking as well that you could also have students watch it. You could give them the link, the steps, and then as a handout, you could even go into a free quiz maker. And there's the link up on the screen there. It's www.quiz-maker.com, where you can go in and you could put all the, say, infant CPR steps in the quiz maker, scramble them, and then you could challenge your students to put them in the correct order. So even if you don't have these two babies, there are still assets and curricula and things and activities that you could do that will help them learn the proper steps. Now we're going to share some other free resources available for use with some of our specialty babies that you may be familiar with. If you're an instructor with access to any of these products, you could create your own in-class demonstration videos and then post them online to share with your students if they happen to be hybrid or remote. Now with the specialty babies, there's a lot of different little mini lessons that you could do with each one. For example, for shaken baby, you could demonstrate actually shaking the baby and what happens in the brain, because the brain lights up as different lobes are impacted. With our drug-affected baby, you could show the baby shaking, going through withdrawal, and the cries that cannot be soothed because they are born in pain. Now with our fetal alcohol syndrome baby, our preemie baby, and our Down syndrome baby, these are mannequins, and you could point out all of the different physical features shown on these babies. And the curricula identifies all of the different physical things that students can see that you could point out. So each of these babies also comes with a separate curricula and information that can be shared with your students. So again, don't reinvent the wheel, but these are very easy ways to incorporate some of these specialty baby foundational information into your programs as well. Now, in addition to using these babies for demonstrators, here's an example of how to take some of the lesson plan content and turn it into a child abuse prevention skill lesson. And so this would be the lesson. We've taken it from our Shaken Baby curricula. And you could first of all begin by sharing the video when babies cry. If you've got that Shaken Baby from us, you will have that DVD. However, if you don't have our Shaken Baby, that video can be found at the link. It's about 13 minutes, but it's just an excellent short video that shows not only what happens to the brain during a shaking, but also what happens to the children who survive a shaking. And there are some family discussions and things that are highlighted that are really, really very impactful. So once you share that, then the next thing in the lesson is what happens during a shaking, the simulation itself, where you could do that if you had a shaken baby. Again, on YouTube, there are other teachers that have put shaken baby demonstrations out there using our shaken baby that are on YouTube. So if you don't want to do your own, you could show that link as well. Next, after that demonstration, then you could give your students access to the infant facts worksheet, the Shaken Baby Syndrome facts handout, the ideas for coping worksheet, and then the My Plan to Manage Frustration activity. And your students could complete all of these. Again, you have them available to you at the link that I shared earlier if you click under Shaken Baby. So that would be a lesson that you could do on child abuse prevention skills that certainly any infant care giver would need to know for on the job. Now we're going to take a look at a few resources available for the Education, Training, Career Cluster Teaching and Training Pathway that you could use for career exploration. And this is our brand new kit focusing specifically on education and training career exploration. Now it includes a lesson in each of the 5 pathways within the cluster. And there are also a card deck of featuring soft skill scenarios that you would find on the job within all of the different pathways as well. There are posters that you can leave up for reference. There are student workbooks that even make the learning extended. These are the 5 different lessons that are in our Education and Training Career Exploration Kit and what the focus of each of those is. So not only do we have early childhood, but we've got elementary, secondary, administration, and support services. And there are activities that go along with each one of those in the kit. So if you'd like to learn more about that, if you go out to our website under Education and Training, you can get a sneak peek at a sample lesson, and it will give you more information about this kit in particular. But wait, there's more before we wrap things up here. If you're looking for some lessons on career exploration to augment your child care pathway program, here are several that we like to make you aware of at this link. There are 5 free lessons that relate to different areas within facts, but all of them are surrounding careers related to working with infants in education and human services. And again, there are 5 lessons at that link. We also have a few other free resources. We have some free posters and infographics all about early childhood education careers. We have a Real Care Baby implementation guide. If you have questions about how to use Real Care Baby to help build an infant and child care career pathway program. We also continue to do webinars like the one we've done today all year long. You can sign up for them for free at the link that you see here on the screen, but everything we do is recorded and it's provided in archived form so that you can listen and watch at your leisure. And there are many, many different facts related topics that we do every month. So check those out. And we also try to engage a lot on social media. So we have a blog. We also are very active on our Facebook and Twitter, and we frequently see other educators as well as sometimes students sharing pictures, ideas, classroom things that are happening around the country on these different forums. So you may want to also check that out. So at this time, I am going to open it up to Q&A. I know that Emily has been watching our chat for any that you might have on some of the information shared today.
All right, I'm going to wait for a couple questions to
All right.
roll in, Denise. But do you want to go over what everybody will be receiving after the webinar?
Yeah, you will be receiving a copy of this presentation because there were many links and things in there and ideas and scenarios. So you'll be able to go back and refer to those. You will also, if you've been live with us, you'll get a certificate of participation that you can use that shows that you participated for the last 35 minutes or so. You will also receive a handout that has all the links that we referred to as well. So it's very easy for you to go back and find things. Emma, am I missing anything?
Nope, that is it. And you should receive that within 24 hours. I do definitely recommend checking your spam mail if you don't see it at least by tomorrow morning. And Denise, I'm not seeing any additional questions coming in at this time.
All right, well, thank you everybody for spending the time with us today. And we hope that you've come away with a few activities and resources that you can use to help build your education and training career cluster pathway program. Thank you very much.